Thank you all for joining. We're here to commemorate my grandfather, Abe Schlussel. We will have my grandfather, Poppy, his kids, Mark, David, and Meryl speaking, Ella, his beloved friend and caregiver, Sheila Schlussel, my grandmother, and then his grandkids will speak. Without further ado, my father, Mark Schlussel, my Poppy's oldest son, will share a few words.
It's so hard to find the appropriate words to pay tribute to my father. Nothing I say will do justice. My dad was my role model in so many ways. I'm sure you will hear from others how beloved he was by all he met and about his role as the patriarch of the extended Schlussel family. I want to briefly share our father's background. He was born in 1923 in Krakow, Poland. At 5 years old, his family moved to Berlin, Germany. Dad learned to fear anyone in uniform and would cross the street to avoid them. When he was 15 years old, my grandmother, Rachel, was in a fish store when a non-Jewish neighbor whispered to get her husband and her older son out. When my grandmother asked her to repeat herself to be sure she heard it correctly, she said, "I'm not talking to you," and left the store immediately. That night, my grandfather and father went into hiding. His brother Sam was only 12 at the time and therefore not at risk. Fortunately, our grandmother took the warning seriously because that night their home was searched and the beds felt to see if they were warm. My grandparents were able to get my father out of Germany shortly thereafter. He traveled alone at 15 years old without speaking English to meet a family he did not know living in Bayonne, New Jersey. His parents and Sam were able to join him several months later. In Bayonne, the school placed him in the 5th grade since the teacher was Jewish and spoke Yiddish. He barely fit behind the 5th grade desk. He knew he couldn't afford college and was not planning on attending. Fortunately, a special high school teacher took interest in him and encouraged him and his parents to send him to college. Our father went to NYU Engineering uptown in campus, and while working and commuting back and forth to Bayonne, he graduated with an electrical engineering degree, and based on his commuting and working experience, he strongly encouraged his parents to find a way for Sam to live on campus, which they did. After serving in the Army, Dad worked as an engineer in an electrical contracting firm. My parents were married in 1952, and so began 70 years of the most beautiful relationship in marriage. The relationship has served as a model for the next 2 generations. The love and respect they shared was unmatched and beautiful. I remember the first time I brought Ronnie home to meet my parents. They were sitting in the living room floor in front of a fireplace, sipping cappuccinos. Ronnie marveled at how connected, supportive, and enduring they were with each other. Throughout our lives, we continue to aspire to grow our relationship by following their example. This is just one way in which my father was my guide and my role model. Just the other day, my son-in-law Ezra asked me why I went into real estate. When I tried to explain, it became clear that the primary reason was not due to an in-depth analysis, but the desire to work with my father. He was incredibly smart and analytical and had the ability to get a tremendous amount done seamlessly, effortlessly. He could multitask like nobody I know. He stayed balanced and kept his sense of humor throughout his entire life. He did it all while treating everyone with dignity and had the ability to connect with everyone. There isn't a single person that I've worked with, who've worked with him, or who I meet anytime who does not rave about the special person that he was. Dad, I will miss you. I will miss sitting with you in shul on Rosh Hashanah and our raucous and simultaneously meaningful Pesach Seders. seeing your smile and the twinkle in your eye, your clever remarks, and the ability to share our lives together. I love you. Thank you for everything.
My father loved family and had a real love affair with my mother. Protected, adored, partnered with her. It might not be team the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly, and she returned the affection and devotion to him. Her care for him last decade or more, actually throughout their whole marriage, but extended many years to his life, and she made sure that it was packed with quality and joy and respect, not just his physical health, but everything, the way he was treated and the way he lived. I want to acknowledge two extraordinary caregivers, Jonathan, who for 9 years cared so well for my father and was invaluable to my mother, and so many ways with our family. And Ella, who really brought my father alive and kept his brain active. And every time he would see her, his face would light up. My father had a very active, inquisitive mind and was always reading. He would read anything he could get his hands on, although rarely books, but all sorts of periodicals, newspapers, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Jewish papers, Moment, Shema, technical journals, pretty much anything. And one of the ones he subscribed to that we shared was an esoteric, scientific, nerd humor magazine, which probably no one's heard of, but it's called the Journal of Irreproducible Results. It's a real journal. It would have such things as articles on fetal psychoanalysis or triple blind studies, or a 2-page social science article that consisted of one sentence and the rest was all footnotes and then footnotes on the footnotes. No one else would find this funny, but we did. He had a love affair with the Jewish people and our family, and of course my mother, and everything else is really secondary. This story, which I shared at the funeral, about my father and mother when they were visiting Japan, halfway across the world, and they were in this hot tub, and across the way in the hot tub was a very attractive woman. And my father is staring at her chest and making my mother very uncomfortable. And she starts nudging him or whatever, and he's pointing out, that woman, we're halfway across the world, she's wearing a Jewish star. She must be Jewish. Let's strike up a conversation with her. And this story just exemplifies how quick thinking he was that my mother bought it. That he's, as I said, had a love affair with the Jewish people, and he sort of collected in some ways as friends, rabbis from across the religious spectrum, scholars as friends. He was a Pied Piper for Elie Wiesel. He not only enjoyed Elie Wiesel's lectures, and I'm not talking about the Elie Wiesel of his memoirs and the Holocaust, but he would have lectures about all sorts of Jewish characters, heroes, biblical figures. And my father liked him so much, he brought him to New Jersey many times to give some of those lectures, as well as he wouldn't just buy tickets for himself to go, but he loved sharing it with others. So he would get extra tickets so he could bring other people along too, to share and enjoy those lectures. The other notable things, separate from the things that Mark had already mentioned, is that he was a real practical joker. He had a great sense of humor, a very dry sense of humor. He could get people to accept comments, criticisms, or whatever without their getting angry with him, just because he had a way about him, a gentleness about him, and just a good sense of humor. My parents were traveling once and got snowed in at an airport. And at the airport, they had to figure out how to survive, get food, and all sorts of other things. And it was a pretty harrowing couple of days. And by the time the flight was ready to leave, everyone was sort of a little punchy. And they went on the plane, and he stood next to the stewardess who was boarding the flight, and he would ask people to see their tickets. And when he saw their tickets, he would say, okay, and he took out a marker and he would write their seat numbers on their hands. He didn't work there. Nobody asked him to do this. He just thought it would be a funny thing to do. And people would line up waiting their turn to have him write their seat numbers on their hands. He also he knew that I like quotes, and because I liked them, he wanted to share some of the ones that were meaningful to him. And he gave me a booklet once, and I'm going to conclude with this, that he had circled 3 quotes, and I will read them to you because I think they say a lot about who he was. The first is that if it takes a lot of words to say what you have in mind, give it more thought. The second was, keep on going, and the chances are you will stumble on something, perhaps when you were least expecting it. I have never heard of anyone stumbling on something sitting down. And the last one, which truly exemplified him, be kind. Remember, everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
I have a special position as my father's only daughter. When I think about my father, certain words come to mind. Eyes. My father had beautiful hazel eyes. They twinkled, and looking into his eyes, you could feel his soul. And you really could feel a deep connection looking into his eyes, which I felt so strongly during his last days. Pride. Mention Abe Schlussel's name in Teaneck and well beyond, and people always had so much respect for him. He was involved in so many things, ranging from supporting weddings for Russians who were not able to have a Jewish wedding, and he supported a mass wedding for them, to the American Arbitration Association. His involvement was vast. I was so proud to be his daughter. Love. Love for my mother. They were an amazing team. There are no words that can describe the care that they took of each other. They represent an example of a marriage that we can all aspire to have. And just looking at my mom up until the last days, he would just look at her with so much love, throw her constant kisses. It was really just the truest of loves. And he also had such a love for his family. Humility. My father quietly did so much, and it's a quality I really admire. Generosity. My father was generous to his family, to his extended family. And one of the biggest areas for him was education. He was such a big supporter of education for his family, his extended family, his employees. It goes on and on. Kindness, curiosity, peacemaker. My father worked on so many committees with such a diverse group of people, and he always was able to help people find a consensus. And his other role as peacemaker was helping me and my mom when the need arose. Consistency. My father knew his values. If there was ever any kind of question or decision that needed to come up, the answer was the whole family should be together. That was it. And his answer to most other questions was chocolate ice cream. A visual of my father that I think is really apropos is when I think about the Passover themed stained glass window that my parents donated at Congregation Beth Aaron in Teaneck. This was not their shul. It was started by many people who were actually breaking away from the shul that my parents went to. It's just one small example of my parents' support for the greater Jewish community. And the choice of donating the Passover stained glass window seems so appropriate. I feel like Passover and the story of the Exodus very much exemplifies my father's escape from Europe. And Passover is such a family time, and it was so central to my family. This year during the pandemic was the first time in all of my life that I did not spend at a Seder with my parents. And his legacy goes on in the way that his children and his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren appreciate the Seder. And I need to end with really my expression of tremendous gratitude to his loving caretakers, Ella and Jonathan, who have truly become a part of our family.
To start with, I must say that it is very hard to talk about Abe and use the words he was. To me, he still is. Those 5 years I spent with him were like having fun with the best friend. I remember one day we were waiting for the doctor in his office in New York, and there were these two women watching us. One of them said that I was taking such good care of my father. I have never seen Abe looking so insulted. What? Father? He always preferred to think that we are friends, close friends. But father? Nah, he wasn't that old to be my father. You know, it's just that his soul was so young. He was getting all jokes. He loved to smile. He smiled with his eyes. We loved and enjoyed our trips to many museums in New York. His favorite, though, was the Met. When we were walking along the museum paths, his head was turning constantly from left to right. He wanted to see everything. He was very curious. And when we finally sat in front of a painting or sculpture, his remarks were brilliant. I've never looked at him as at the person with memory problems. He was bright, smart, funny, knowledgeable, and intelligent. He was just Abe. Abe who wanted to please people, who always wanted to answer all my questions, to speak with long, full sentences, using sophisticated vocabulary. Here's one of the examples. You wouldn't believe what he said. It was in the year 2019, not that long ago, about Martin Luther King. So this is what he said. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed because he was advocating equality for Blacks. He was killed by a white bigot. He was speaking too forcefully about the quality of legislation, laws, and freedom of his Black people. And I have a witness that can confirm that this is not a made-up story, but his own words. My life won't be the same anymore without him. And I'd like to read my birthday card that I wrote on his 96th birthday that concludes what I wanted to say today. My dear Abe, it is your 96th birthday today. I just want to tell you that you are my 1 meter from serve. That means perfection. Your kindness, politeness, sense of humor, cooperation, and dignity are unique. Please don't change. Stay the way you are and be an example for other people who have a chance to know you like I do. Long story short, I love you.
Thank you, Ella. Next up is my grandmother, Sheila Schlussel.
I have been asked by so many people during these last few days how Abe and I met. His parents lived in the Bronx as we did. And his parents owned a Shomer Shabbos dairy store. And of course, they were closed all day Shabbos. But by evening, people were so hungry. Their store was about as big as a very small Bronx bathroom, very small. And people lined up to get their food for the rest of the week. Anyway, my mother had run out of butter, and she sent me down to get a half a pound of sweet butter. And I went into the store and made my way toward the cashier. And Abe was standing there collecting money on Shabbos for his parents and trying to help out a bit. And I said to him, I didn't say it. I winked at him and I said, is it possible to get a half a pound of butter? That's all I need. That's the only thing I need. And he looked at me and he said, sure. So we went to the showcase and picked out a half a pound of print butter, the one that's wrapped, the kind we see these days. And he brought it to me and I said, oh no, we only want tub butter, the kind of butter you cut from a large barrel. And he never did that before. And he said, okay. And he cut and tried to cut as close to a half a pound as he estimated. And I said, oh, that's wonderful, knowing he was pretty weak at it. But I left the store and he said to his mother, who's that girl? And his mother turned to him and said, that's the girl I've been telling you about that you didn't want to meet because I recommended her. And he said, well, find out what her first name is. So I went to the store subsequently, again to shop. And it was very close to the time we were going to move from the East Bronx to the West Bronx. And he got my first name from his mother and he called me to go out on a date. And I said, I can't. I have to help my family move. And he kept insisting on going out. And I went to my mother finally and said, do you think I can go for Saturday night? And she said, go ahead. We'll manage. And I did. I came home from that date, and as I usually did, and sat on the bed of my parents after every date. And I said, he's the first guy I met that isn't wet behind the ears. Now, most of you don't understand what that means because nobody uses that expression anymore. But it means pretty mature and really nice. Anyway, he called me after we moved to the West Bronx almost immediately. And 11 months later, we were married. And that was the beginning of it all. He loved rabbis all his life, all kinds of rabbis, no matter what their bent. And one of his very favorite was Shlomo Carlebach. And Shlomo Carlebach called him very frequently, just like that, for no reason, just to talk. But when he called the office, he kept calling and said to the secretary, let me speak to Holy Abe. And as you know, that would be Shlomo Carlebach's way. He called me every year on my birthday. We really had a great friendship with him and loved his music and danced to his music in our home. And we once had a get together with a lot of friends, and many of the people watching here would know that. And he came to our home and sang for hours and hours by candlelight, as he would. Anyway, I must tell you this story because I think it's so meaningful to me. About 3 years ago, Abe was not in perfect health, but he was good. He was good. With the help of Jonathan and Ella, he was great. But it was Yom Kippur, and we never had a very long break, but I ran home and to see how Abe was doing, and he wasn't doing well at all. And by that, I can't even explain what I mean, but you could tell he wasn't doing well. And I went to shul in tears. And Rabbi Goldberg happened to be in the hallway there at that moment. They hadn't begun the second part or the last part of the service. And I said to him, Rabbi, Abe's not doing well. Can we do another Mishra Barach in the afternoon? Is it possible to do it now? I need to pray for him. And Rabbi, in his usual way of charm and flexibility, said, I'll work it in to the last part of the service. And he did. And I was able to say a Mishra Barach for Abe. And I prayed with all my heart. And he never had a downturn after that for several more years. And I can't explain it, but I can only tell you that I believe I was heard and he was helped. And I'll never forget the kindness of the rabbi in altering the plan. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. And I am sort of a spiritual person in addition to observant. And it all meant so much to me.
I'm Katie, and I'm the oldest of Poppy's 9 grandchildren. And I wanted to share a couple of short anecdotes about Poppy and what it was like to be his granddaughter. As already mentioned, the most important thing to Poppy was his family. Nana and Poppy built a beach house on Long Beach Island so that the family had a place to be together. On summer weekends, 17 family members would pack into the house, all the cousins bunking together in 2 rooms. It was noisy and chaotic, but it created some of the happiest memories for all of us and helped us form the bonds that we have today. Poppy, who loved to repurpose anything from objects at work and cabinets or tables at home, gathered old wooden planks and built out a space under the deck for the cousins to conspire and build our own Lord of the Flies environment. Parenting in the 90s was clearly a lot more laid back, since no one seemed concerned that there were sharp nails sticking out of most of the boards. Each year for our birthdays, Nana and Poppy would take the grandchildren, sometimes several cousins at a time, for special birthday outings to the theater and a restaurant. When we graduated from high school, Nana and Poppy took us on a cruise with them. Experiences were always more important to them than material possessions, and above all else, the ability to share those experiences with each other. All holidays, but especially Pesach, were central to our family, and as the family grew, we had a hard time squeezing everyone around the table, but no one possibly considered an alternative arrangement. While Nana is the storyteller and often the more vocal member of their relationship, Poppy was always present with a twinkle in his eye, a mischievous joke, and quiet leadership. He was a true patriarch for our family in every sense of the word and led our family by example. Poppy's good nature, his generosity, his dedication to community through service and tzedakah, and his emphasis on family are some of the characteristics I can only hope to emulate in my own life. While we no longer have Poppy with us, his legacies and lessons will live on forever in his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren.
Hi, I'm Rachel, the next grandchild. Katie said some of the things that I was going to say specifically about the beach house, unsurprisingly, but I just wanted to share like a couple scattered thoughts here. And one of them is it's very hard to talk about Poppy without also talking about Nana, because their names are Abraham and Sarah, and they're very truly a matriarch and patriarch of our family, and the number of people and really a community. And the number of people that are on this call right now are really a testament to that. And at the funeral yesterday, I was talking to my mom, and I was reflecting, can you imagine the number of people that would have been here if it weren't for the circumstances right now? But I think that whenever you ask Poppy what he wanted to do to celebrate anything, whether it be a birthday or their anniversary or for a holiday, his only request is really just that the whole family should be together. And so I think it was really special that we did get to have one last time of the whole family, besides for our Kohanim, being together. And I know that was really important to him, and it was very special that we got to have that as a last experience. Just a couple of scattered thoughts. I was remembering, as Katie said, we got to go on a cruise with Nana and Poppy when we graduated from high school. I got to go 1 year early because Katie was 1 year ahead. So when she graduated, I got to go too after my junior year of high school. And we went on an amazing trip to Alaska with Nana and Poppy. And there was one night on the cruise ship where they were playing the newlywed game, and they asked people in the audience to volunteer, and they had a newly married couple, a couple married like 20-30 years, and they wanted a couple married 50+ years. And so Katie and I, not knowing what we were getting ourselves into, we're pushing Nana and Poppy to volunteer to go on stage. And I just remember they were both very good sports, and they went on stage. And I remember as the questions got progressively more embarrassing, Katie and I were just like had our heads in our hands, and we were just, what did we get ourselves into? We were so embarrassed as they asked more and more personal questions, and we had to listen to the answers on stage. So I'm not going to go into detail about what was said, but they were both just they were willing to humor us, even though Poppy was not like the type of grandfather necessarily to get on the floor and play with the babies, but they were always they were the ones who made sure that they were kind of the patrons of our more like adult mature experiences, and they were always challenging us to bringing us to doing those more grown-up things, like going out to the theater and going out to a nicer meal, or going going on a big trip, and having the responsibility, and expecting us to be mature and being able to handle those kinds of experiences. Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about my Poppy, I just think, like, as my mom said, that twinkle in his eye, and that little bit of mischief and that joy that he always had, and that was really there until the very end. And when he would come into our house for any holiday, he would always make the joke about my mom, and he would say, whatever it was that my mom had cooked, he would always make the joke of not just a good looker, but a good cooker, which, considering the other things that my mom has accomplished in her life, you could choose to be offended by a comment like that. But when Poppy would say that, you wouldn't be offended by it, because that he only meant well. I just feel incredibly lucky to be his granddaughter, and to be able to be part of the amazing family that he built. So thank you for that. And with that, I will pass it along to, I think Rebecca is next.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm next in line of the grandchildren. Some of what I wanted to say was mentioned already, but I guess one memory I wanted to share is about Pesach was always such a big time for our family, and Poppy led the Pesach Seders for many years, and as a kid, one of our favorite parts was always when he would say Achami Odea in one breath. That was always really fun. And then as he got older, as he would pretend to say it in one breath, but always with a lot of joy and a lot of humor. Thinking back on those Pesach Seders, I also remember how his love for the Jewish people would shine through in things that he would say at the Seder. And for him, the connection to the Jewish people, it wasn't just, some fancy words that he would say once a year. It was a commitment where he gave his whole self. He served on all kinds of boards and committees and community organizations, and he was always giving more and more. Is a real role model for what it meant to be in community. And another tradition that we had was he would always give a bracha before Yom Kippur every year. And somehow thinking about that is really where I really feel his absence, thinking that that's not going to happen anymore. But I feel so lucky to have been his granddaughter, to be his granddaughter, and to be a part of the amazing family that he created. And so with that, I'll pass along to Sam and Gavi.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. My grandpa Abe, who we all called Poppy, is among my biggest heroes. His life epitomized the American dream. As my uncle Mark went into more detail on earlier, he came to the United States at 15, leaving Germany after Kristallnacht in 1938. He spoke essentially no English and initially came without his family. Over the course of the next 80 plus years, he had success in so many aspects of his life, achieving great things in business, philanthropy, and most importantly to him, in his family life, where the closeness of his dozens of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are a lasting testament to his devotion and his priorities. Sometimes, unfortunately, when someone passes away well into their 90s, many people who knew them, including perhaps many of the people on this call, don't necessarily know or recall the deceased from when they were more vibrant and energetic. Poppy was lucky enough to remain well-spoken and articulate well into his 80s. And as a way of displaying what he was like and what a loving and beautiful relationship he and my grandmother shared, Gabi and I wanted to share this excerpt from an interview of him when he was already well into his 80s. Please excuse any choppiness in the video quality.
And I did fairly well. I married also a girl, which I'm kind of fond of. Right?
I guess so.
52 years now. More than 53.
Right, I think it is. It is 53.
That's yet. Another week.
Oh, right.
Every second.
Right.
When Sam and I started we hope that this gives some insight into who Poppy was, what his personality was like, and how much he loved his family and especially loved his wife. When Sam and I started dating, Poppy was just about 90 years old, and I didn't have the privilege of knowing him in this condition, but I would still catch him looking at Nana or scanning the scene of his family all together at whatever occasion it was, with that same smile on his face, making clear to everyone just how much he adored them.
Thank you for letting us share this. We'll miss our Poppy, and we'd like to pass it along to the next speaker.
Growing up, the other kids called us cousins the cult. The 9 of us poppy seed cousins were all close in age. We went to school together, camped together, shul together. We lived next to each other and spent summer weekends at Nana and Poppy's beach house together. The bonds that we've had growing up felt automatic because of what Nana and Poppy created for us. The home that they built prioritized family togetherness. The relationship that they had modeled adoration and respect. They fostered opportunities for us to be together so we wouldn't just be family, but also close friends. Poppy had a way of silently supporting everyone around him without claiming attention for himself. He quietly built and maintained a clubhouse for us cousins, as you heard about. He taught us about thoughtfulness, generosity, and kindness through his actions. The challenges that Poppy faced in his life could give anyone a reason for bitterness or resentment, but Poppy was always quick with a smile or a joke, even as his health declined. Much of who I am and what I have today can be directly traced to Poppy's influence in my life. My mischievous, my sense of humor, my hazel eyes, my appeal to mosquitoes, my desire for adventure, my values of family, Jewish community, kindness, and gratitude, my education and abundance of opportunity. As the axiom goes, give a man to fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for his lifetime. Poppy, I still have so much to learn from your resilience and your quiet leadership, but you have given me the tools to live my life in your giant footsteps. Your gifts not only continue to provide me with the strength and support for the rest of my life, but will be felt by my children and their children for generations to come. I can't articulate how lucky I feel to be your granddaughter. I am and forever will be proud to be a poppy seed. Now I think is Jonathan.
A lot of people have already said some of the things I was thinking, but something that struck me most about Poppy is the impact he had on everyone he met. It's something that I've noticed over the past 5-10 years since I began interning and working in related industry, that I've come across a lot of people that knew him from his Electricon days, and they all say that he was smart and hardworking, but that they all rave about his character. He was honest and fair and kind and generous. But surprising to me that anyone, that your relationship is just a business relationship, to have such strong feelings about about someone's character. But it's really unbelievable that they really all rave about him, and it always brings me a lot of joy and makes me feel very proud to be his grandson, and to have the Schlussel name. Such a good example for all of us, giving so much to his family, to his community, both time and money, and really just set a great example for all of us, and for us to aspire to be like, and just hope to make him as proud as he's made me. I'm gonna hand it over to Adam now.
I think a lot of people have hit on different of the same attributes of Poppy that I wanted to talk about, and I think Emily said it best of calling us the clan. But being a Schlussel has always truly been like a badge of honor that I wear, especially growing up in Teaneck. Everybody knew the name, and I felt proud to be a Schlussel. And that comes directly from Nana and Poppy and what they did and how they were community members and really pillars. They were pillars of the community. And Rebecca and I did a cooking class in the city, and it's just an example of how this has never gone away. So we did this cooking class at the JCC about a year or two ago, and someone found out that we just got engaged, or we were soon to get married, and they were interested, like, oh, what's your name? We'll crash your wedding or whatever. And they found out that I was a Schlussel. And this one person goes, Schlussel, like Abe Schlussel. And I'm like, in this JCC cooking class, and somehow someone knows my 90-year-old grandfather. And apparently he had done business with Poppy, or his father had done business with Poppy. And working with Poppy left such an impression on this man that he recalled the building that they worked on together, exactly where it was, how Poppy, helped them out. And it was one small example that was so classic throughout my life of what it is to be Abe's grandson. And it's just something that I still wear, and being a Schlussel still makes me proud, and being part of this amazing family that Poppy and Nana created is something I will take with me, and we will pass on to our kids. And it's just something incredible that I think that I can't take for granted, and I totally owe to them. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Josh.
Thanks, Adam. One of the things that a lot of my cousins touched on, and for good reason, is the clubhouse that Poppy built for us at their beach house out along Beach Island. It's emblematic of who he was. You can afford to buy a beach house, you can afford to pay someone to build a clubhouse for your grandchildren. So this is something that he wanted to do and could do on his own. He spent countless hours playing, cleaning, and for some reason, using the bathroom in that clubhouse. You can make the argument that that clubhouse is where the unparalleled relationships that we have as cousins really began to take shape. But Poppy and Nana didn't just build us a clubhouse. They built us a club. What we are as a family today doesn't just happen. It's a club that's built, shaped, continuously guided. It's built with values like family, community, learning, tzedakah. It's shaped with traditions like saying Kagadian one breath on Pesach. Rebecca will have to go back and forth about which of the two things it was he would say at one breath. Gathering at the beach in the summer with our extended family on Thanksgiving, celebrating Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot and Hanukkah and Shavuos together. It's predicated on an understanding that what we have in this world, education, sustenance, fulfilling work, and a support system, isn't a given. After all, Poppy came to the United States at 15 without any of those things. But he made sure that his kids and theirs had all of them. I said before that what we have as a family isn't just naturally occurring. It's built and it's molded over time until it's something that stands on its own. So while the four walls of that clubhouse may not be anymore, thanks to those who built it, that club is as strong as ever. Next up is Danya.
If you haven't picked up on it already, we are going in chronological order. So I will be the last speaker tonight. And it is somewhat of a tradition in our family to say or come up with poems for basically any time we get together. So I wrote this one yesterday and I read it at the funeral, and I'm going to read it to you guys. Hopefully it kind of sums up everything that you've been hearing tonight. To the family patriarch, the man who always left a mark on everyone he met, no one could ever forget. The man who made everyone smile with a funny quip or hand squeeze. Meanwhile, the man also had a devilish side. You wouldn't be alone if you caught him sneaking the cookie he eyed. It made you smile all the same, one of the many qualities that made you love hearing his name. But this man was about more than just a laugh. He gave charity galore to an extent you only know the half. He put his money where his mouth is and gave so much time serving on endless boards, making contributions that changed lives. The truth is, if anyone knew everything he did, it'd be a miracle, because he made an effort to connect, comfort, and help every individual without looking for a hint of acknowledgement, letting the people he touched be proof enough of his accomplishments. A family man who loved his parents and brother chose a woman just as kind and selfless who would be a wonderful mother. A true partner in everything, his contributions not done alone, and together they raised 3 children and built a home. Their kids in turn followed suit, and now the grandchildren have begun to recruit, growing a beautiful family that knows endless love, because for them he always went beyond and above. Judaism and education were important values too. The 15-year-old 5th grader eventually graduated from NYU. For him, these values went hand in hand. He donated scholarships but made his home the classroom he manned, trying to impart his endless wisdom and sharing his love for Judaism. Whatever state he was in, he showed the value of reading. With a newspaper over his face in a chair, you could find him sleeping. He also demonstrated his care for Jewish tradition. Nana may have been the one preparing for festivities in the kitchen, but together they celebrated Shabbat and holidays, inviting friends and colleagues to partake in their ways. A love for Israel was also at the root, while showing their kids how to keep a Jewish home in kashrut. Oh, Poppy, you are the best, they'd say, and there was never any just, no way. Yes, you were cuddly and dear, but there were so many reasons we were happy you were here. You were the greatest grandfather, role model, teacher, and friend, and while you are no longer here, this is by no means the end. Your legacy lives on in each of your seeds, who make an effort to channel you in the lives each of us leads. Oh, Poppy, think you doesn't seem enough for a man who gave others so much. We love you so dearly, and to you we say, you will be in our hearts forever and always. I believe that concludes the rest of this. Shiva, I think, will continue tomorrow morning, the individuals at 10. I know that there were some issues with the one for my dad and Nana today. Some of the links weren't correct, so if you want to go to those tomorrow and you have not received the correct link yet, you can reach out to my mom at rdschlussel@gmail.com and she can send you that one. Thank you guys so much for letting us share about our Poppy tonight.